Well guys, I just got out of the theater from watching James Gunn's Superman, and I'm gonna be honest with you. Not only do I think this is the best Superman movie made thus far, but I think it might be my new favorite DC movie. I honestly have so many thoughts on this movie, and the video will be split into two halves. First half of this video gonna be spoiler free, but the second half I have to talk about spoilers. I will warn you when that point comes, but I'm just telling y'all now. First, I'm gonna start off with some of the things I was mixed or negative on, which wasn't many honestly, because I actually really enjoyed this movie and I didn't have that many problems with it. So I'm gonna get my negatives out of the way right now so that we can end off on a more positive note. For starters, while this is the start of a new DC cinematic universe, if you don't know what a Superman is or what DC even is, you are going to be lost while watching this movie. It does do a good job of getting you into this universe, but it is not an origin story, so don't expect to get Superman's origin, seeing Krypton. There's none of that in here. We jump straight into the action, which isn't really a negative for me personally, but I'm just putting it out there for casual viewers. Another thing I will say is while I did enjoy the CGI quite a bit, I will admit there were some wonky moments, but nothing that completely ruins the viewing experience in my opinion. Another thing I will mention is there are a lot of subplots in this movie, and while the movie does do a good job tackling most of these, some of them do feel a little underdeveloped because of how much the movie is trying to throw at you and get you to understand, and I feel that it gets a little bit messy sometimes. Another thing I did feel a little let down by is actually Ultraman and the Engineer. These characters have been shown throughout the marketing and the trailers, and I wasn't the biggest fan of how they were implemented in the film personally. I was just very underwhelmed, but I'll get more into that in my spoiler section of the video. And that's about it. We've got all of my negatives out of the way. Let's start glazing the hell out of this movie. Okay, for starters, this is the only comic book movie I've seen that felt like a comic book come to life. I actually really love the way this movie looks visually, and I really enjoy the cinematography, and I really like what James Gunn was going for here. It completely sets the tone for the rest of the DCU going forward, and if this is what we're gonna be getting, I am all here for it, man. This is one of the only times I felt like I was stepping into a world different from our own, because so many comic book movies try to be grounded and realistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. I do think it works most of the time, but I like that we're finally getting comic book movies that lean into their source material being comic books. Another thing I really enjoyed was the characters. I would argue they're the strongest part of the movie, and I enjoyed almost all of them. David Cornsweet is genuinely so amazing as Superman and Clark Kent. It was actually perfect casting. I love his portrayal of the character so much. I think he's super charming and endearing, and he captures that old school Superman energy very well. Rachel Brosnahan is a perfect Lois Lane in my opinion, and I really enjoyed the dynamic that she had with Clark in this movie. Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor personally stole the show for me. I think he is one of the greatest DC villains we've ever had. Nicholas Hoult captures his evil, sadistic energy so well, and I love how he's written in this movie. There are genuinely times when I wanted to punch Lex Luthor in the face myself. This was perfect casting in my opinion. James Gunn did such a good job with Lex Luthor. And you know what? I also didn't mind the Justice Gang in this movie. They don't take away from Superman, and they're definitely here to complement the film, and I feel like the movie is still very much a Superman movie, but having characters like Guy Gardner's Green Lantern, who is absolutely hilarious, and Mr. Terrific, who might actually be my second favorite character in the entire movie, because bro is just straight aura farming throughout the film. You'll see what I mean when you watch it. I honestly think they were a great addition to the movie, and I like that they aren't too intrusive. Next, I really want to talk about the score of this film, because I genuinely think the score was peak. I know the main theme is just a redone version of the John Williams theme, but I think it hits hard, and I think it's really good in this movie. And there's a lot of other music in this movie that really resonated with me, and I love how James Gunn implements this kind of music in certain scenes, and I think it genuinely gives the film more of an identity. And finally, I gotta talk about these fight scenes because, man, they are absolutely wild. There was so much crazy stuff happening on screen towards the end, my mouth was genuinely wide open. Like, I was flabbergasted by the stuff James Gunn was putting in this movie. It is just genuinely so exciting to watch, and I really love how they utilize Superman's powers in this movie. But with that, that is the end of the spoiler-free section. Leave now because it is spoilers from here. You have been warned. Okay, for starters, I absolutely love the plot and storyline of this film. Having the entire plotline kind of revolve around the fact that Superman interferes with a war going on in another country, and then that leads to Lex weaponizing what happened and using this to get people to turn on Superman easier because of how much a D1 hater this guy is genuinely so fascinating to me, and I think it's really interesting seeing Superman try to do the right thing, try to save people, and then him having to face the consequences of his actions even though he was in the right. I also just really enjoy the themes of kindness and hope spread throughout the storyline, and this movie made me feel hopeful and happy by the end of it. I had a big dumb smile on my face for most of the runtime, and I genuinely think this movie perfectly captures what Superman is supposed to be. Because ultimately, Superman is supposed to be a symbol of peace and hope, a better future, a better tomorrow, and I think the movie nailed this, especially because David Cornsweet's Superman, you can see throughout the film, he is desperately trying to be the kindest man he can be. He wants to help humanity. He genuinely cares about all life, no matter how big or small, and to just see this world turn on him when he's trying to be there for it, it's genuinely, like, really powerful stuff, and at times it's very heartbreaking. And I love how this movie isn't just aura farming or fight scenes. We actually get to see Superman save people, and we even get to see him save, like, animals and stuff. At one point, he even saves a squirrel, and as goofy as that is, it showcases his Boy Scout good boy attitude and trying to do what's right, and he believes that every life matters, and he just wants to save everybody, and that is just so Superman to me. I also just really enjoyed the tone of this film. Yes, there are a lot of goofy moments, but this movie kind of reminds me a lot of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, with scenes of Superman getting helped by civilians and them trying to be there for him when he needs help, you know, and it kind of builds a greater sense of community, and it shows how Superman is giving hope to people. And getting back to the goofiness a little bit, I actually really like the comedy in this movie. It's not forced and it comes very naturally. I think my favorite joke was the running gag of Jimmy Olsen somehow rizzing up Lex Luthor's girlfriend because it's a girl he used to date that is somehow still obsessed with him, and he is just not into her at all. I just thought that was the funniest gag in the whole movie, honestly. Another thing I will say too is I actually really liked what they did with Krypto in this movie. He doesn't really overstay his welcome, and he doesn't take away a lot from the movie. He's there, but I think they used just the right amount of Krypto. I feel like if they did a lot of Krypto, it would kind of take away from Superman, and it would be a little bit annoying, but I like how much Krypto is used in the film, and I think a lot of the scenes with him are really cute and funny. It's also just really crazy to think about that Lex's entire plan was to literally take over another country and do all of this crazy stuff, you know, setting up Superman with fake bots online to, you know, bring his reputation down and spread all this propaganda with literal monkeys controlled with brain chips. Yeah, I know, pretty wild stuff. Him capturing all these different people that he just despises and hates and locking them in this insane prison. And he's doing all of this insane stuff just because he hates Superman that much, and he's that much of a D1 hater, and he's so jealous of Superman that he just wants to kill him. But not just kill him, ruin his entire life in the process. bro is just the best villain ever in this movie, and yet he's so, like, I don't know how to describe it. He's so, like, bad that you hate him, but at the same time, he's one of those villains that you love to hate. Sorry, I know this video isn't, like, the greatest in terms of structure. Usually these out of the theater reviews are always, like, super unscripted. I'm sorry, guys. You're gonna have to bear with me. I really love this movie. Getting back to what I said about Ultraman and the engineer, however, I think the engineer has some cool powers, but she was just kind of boring to me. I didn't really care about her as a villain. And Ultraman, I will admit, a lot of scenes with him were cool, but once they actually reveal that Ultraman is nothing more than a simple clone of Superman, not Bizarro, not some, like, alternate universe, thing, or something a little bit more interesting, just a clone that Lex Luthor made really quickly. And they just explain it away like that. I don't know, he felt very underwhelming, especially since he dies at the end. Now, I will say, the fight scenes between Ultraman and Superman were pretty cool. But again, I don't know, I feel like he was one of the weaker parts of the movie. Another great thing about this movie is the relationship between Ma Kent and Pa Kent and Clark. They genuinely feel like a family, and I think both of them were perfectly cast. And there's a specific scene in the movie that I think is actually the best scene in the entire film. Now, a little bit of context before I talk about this scene. In the movie, they explain that the tape that got sent down with Superman was, damaged in the process, but then Lex Luthor does some crazy stuff to get the rest of the tape, and then he translates it to slander Superman's name, and it reveals that Jor-El and his family, his father, his mother, they wanted him to come down to Earth and basically become God and rule over it and have a harem of women, which is pretty wild. And all of this stuff makes Clark feel like shit because he thought his parents sent him down here to do some good and be a savior to humanity. And it's all really interesting stuff. I actually really enjoyed this plot element, but I really love the scene where it's right after Clark has just been beaten to hell. He's already had his name slandered, and he's with his dad. And he has a conversation with him, and his dad basically lifts him up and says, whatever your parents, said, it doesn't matter. Your actions and the choices you make you who you are. All parents are supposed to do is try to raise their kid and get them in the right direction, but we don't decide who they are going to be. And he basically says that he is proud of the man that Clark is, and he's proud that he is a hero and he is the kind soul that he is. And this entire conversation is really sweet, and it's such an emotional moment, and I did choke up a little bit when I saw the scene, and it hits a little bit close to home, personally, at least for me. And I personally think it was the best part of the entire movie. I wish there was more moments like this in the film. And oh man, Pa Kent, their relationship is just great. I mean, it's so good. It's just so peak, man. What do you want me to say? I mentioned earlier that the Justice Gang were really good in this movie and they didn't feel too intrusive, and that's how I felt about all of the other cameos. There's actually a really funny scene where Peacemaker shows up in a news interview talking shit about Superman. Now, I actually have a theory that this isn't even the main Peacemaker that we've been following, but this is the multiverse variant that Peacemaker is going to end up killing in Season 2 that's coming out in August. That's my theory, at least, on what was going on there in that, joke scene. But there were also other characters who showed up. For example, we had Rick Flag Sr. make an appearance, and all of these cameos and all these characters showing up, they don't take away from Superman. It's still a Superman movie, and I think it's actually pretty good world building, especially considering this is supposed to be the start of the DCU, so it makes sense for all these characters to show up in some, way or form. But I like how James Gunn did it. It was, not too overbearing. I also really enjoyed how Lex Luthor is kind of orchestrating all of this stuff behind the scenes. He's having distractions like kaijus and him being behind the hammer of Baravia to go in and, fight Superman. And you get kind of like, almost like it's structured like a Superman cartoon where you have him, you know, fighting the kaiju, dealing with the Hammer of Baravia, doing all this different stuff that Lex has set up for him. I actually really liked how they structured this. I thought it was pretty cool personally. And I was actually a little bit shocked when they revealed that the Hammer of Baravia was just Ultraman in disguise. Wasn't expecting that, not gonna lie. Also, to talk about Mr. Terrific for a bit, because I think this guy needs his own solo movie, like right now, please, James Gunn, because every scene with this man's is like the coolest part of the movie. The fight scenes, you know, where he's using his spears and his powers and his intellect to defeat people, and like, I just think Mr. Terrific is one of the best parts of this movie. He's just such an awesome character, and I really like the dynamic that he has with Superman. But to wrap things up, I like the tease at the end showcasing Supergirl, you know, since she's going to be the next, you know, big movie, and it's based off that comic where she starts getting drunk because Kryptonians, you know, can kind of become more human under the red sun. And that's how she starts getting drunk and partying, and that's going to lead, you know, into the Supergirl movie, because it's very much based off the comics. I also really liked what they did with Metamorpho in this movie. I don't have as much to say about him, but I thought he was a pretty good addition to the film. Also, the scene where Krypto stands on business and absolutely fucks up Lex Luthor is one of the most satisfying parts of the film, and then Lex Luthor at the end gets sent to jail, and the dude calls him a bald ass. Literally, I was so happy. I was like, finally, Lex is getting what he deserves, because Superman restrains himself. He does not punch Lex. He does not do anything to him. Bro's better than me. Overall, I really loved this movie, genuinely. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's one of James Gunn's best films. Besides The Batman with Robert Pattinson, obviously, I would say this is my favorite DC film. And I think all of you should watch it. Go watch Superman. It's really peak. Probably one of the best movies of this year. Just wait till the Letterboxd review and where I rank that. But I'll see you in whatever my next project is, and I hope you enjoyed the video.